Afternoon, everyone. I'm Ben with Bates Nursery, and we are doing an episode of Bates Nursery Botanical Bootcamp this afternoon on landscape design basics. So we're kind of doing something a little bit different today, trying something out. So bear with us. We're going to kind of do a little more drawing. Let me make sure I'm focusing on where y'all are looking at me from. We're going to do some drawing. I've got a little drafting board out here just to give me a surface so y'all can see everything. I'm going to try to keep this as basic as possible. So we're not going to get into real fancy stuff. Basically, what can I do at home to get my ideas down on paper, get myself some guidance, just some basic things you can do. I like to call it the junk drawer in your kitchen option. So whatever pens, pencils you can find in your junk drawer, you know, in the console of your car, use that. Basics, get it down on paper, so we can get an idea of where we're going to go. Next week, I believe it is, or is it the week after, March the 4th? I'm doing a talk on landscape drawing specifically, so whenever we're talking more about specific drawing trees, drawing plants, stuff like that, we'll talk more about that on March the 4th in more detail. So this is just going to be basic abstract. So we're just going to dive right in. Towards the end, I'm going to show you some examples of where you can get inspiration. So we'll talk about that last. And at the beginning, we're going to kind of see what we can get onto paper real loose. If I can, I'll try to make a copy of this available to y'all if you want like a little worksheet, just for future reference. So what we're trying to do is simple and quick methods to get our ideas on the paper. Again, like I said, any pens, pencils you can get available to you. Colors are great. Colors really help us understand things. 8.5 by 11 paper is great. I've got some graph paper. Makes it easier for you to do measurements and be a little bit accurate without a ruler. You can use anything, computer paper, trace paper, whatever you have available is great. There is like trash. I have some leftover tracing paper, drafting paper here that you can see through just so y'all can see it. Totally not necessary. You can do this on a napkin if you want. And I'm going to kind of use our earth mix trial garden, which we'll talk more about in following videos. But for our earth mix products, we'd really like a space where we can trial our products, where we can plant new plants, and just kind of have an area that we can do further videos with. So that's what we're going to base this on today. And we've gone out and done some simple measurements, basically measuring where the buildings are, where the plants are, and got simple measurements, and I've transferred that to this paper. I didn't put a scale on here. I'll go ahead and put that. So each of these squares is a 1/4 inch. So I'll put that down here. So 1/4 inch on this equals 3 feet. And that's a pretty good thing to know. So just in case I want to explain this to someone else, how big this space is, I know that every 3 feet, I have one of these squares. That makes measuring really easy. I know if a plant is 3 feet across, it's going to take up 1 square. So whatever scale you have, it's good to write that down. If you're not sure what scale you have, you know, you can easily figure that out and adjust it to where it'll fit on that paper. Again, we can talk more about that in specific drawing. But just know every square is 3 feet on this paper. And this earth mix garden, just to give y'all an overview, I've got a north arrow, which is a very important thing to know. So the north that we have coming in here is going to be important for sun, shade, wind direction. So that's a very important thing to know. As well as I've kind of marked out our buildings. So we have our greenhouse back here. There's a fence right here. And over here, we have a private residence. So this kind of gives us an idea of the space we have with a boardwalk right in the middle. Mark whatever you can that's important to you. So for instance, there's a road right here. It's good to know where the road is, where the traffic is. Maybe we're trying to block something. And any plants that we already have, we've marked out existing. So if we want to remove those, move them, or keep them where they are, we know where they are. So I've drawn these kind of little circles to denote the plants that we have, just to give us something to make ideas off of. And also knowing what you have available. So I did note on the side we do have 4 water barrels. And we'll get more information on these, and I'm just going to make a note for myself. But for this space, we do have 4 large, basically, watering troughs, and we can use those for planting, so that's something to know that we have to work with. If you've already got plants that you want to plant, write those down so you know what you have. Okay, we've got our basic idea, what we want to play with, just some basic things marked out. And we're going to go ahead and try to get some ideas down on paper. Again, like I said, we measured the space, drew a simple plan, and then wrote down issues. So I didn't talk about water drainage, rocky areas. If you know it's rocky, you notice you have standing water. Write that down, mark it out, take note of it so it's something you know about. And then I used basically just a Sharpie for this drawing just so it would stand out. Like I said, anything you have, use a pencil. We'll probably switch up colors so you could see what we're doing a little more. But just something nice and dark so you can see it. Doesn't have to be accurate, doesn't have to be perfect for what we're doing. I'll just go ahead and mention a couple tools before we get doing some drawing. So again, Sharpies, I do have some pens here, just kind of a collection of different colored pens, not a big deal what you use. I do have a triangle, just to kind of give me a straight edge. Here, y'all can see it a little better there. Triangle to give you a little straight edge, a ruler or a scale. To those who want to be a little more specific, something to give us straight lines. I'm not going to worry about measuring since I have this graph paper. And then I have a circle template. Circle template's nice. They can be a little expensive. You could easily use any circular objects you have in your house. So pen caps or lids to containers are fine. The good thing about this is it does give us measurements. So if I know my circle is 1/4 inch and this is 1/4 inch is 3 feet, if I draw a 1/4 inch circle, then it's a 3 foot wide plant. So that kind of makes it easy. Little circle template's pretty handy for drawing trees. We'll use this a lot in the March 4th talk about drawing. Okay, so I'm going to get some kind of just tracing paper. Like I said, trash paper, see-through paper. I've got some marker paper up here, that would work fine. But I've just kind of got these offcuts of paper, and we're just going to use it to do some fast sketching. So let's see. And you might call this a diagram, you might call it a sketch, but we're just going to lay this over so we can draw right above that. And let me see what ideas we want to start with. So, some of the diagrams that I suggest you might want to start with are maybe sunshade, moving water, movement of people, so where we're going to walk, areas you want to have, sitting areas, walking areas, viewpoints, which I think is very important to think about. So where are we looking at this space? As well as anything else you want to put down on here, anything specific. So I'm going to get a different color pen. Just so we can see a little bit better, and I'm just going to change up colors. We're going to do this nice bright orchid pink here, and I'm going to start out with kind of sunshade. So we're going to call this sun, and we're just going to do a quick drawing of sunshade. In fact, for shade, we'll just use a different color, like something dark, like a brown. So I'm going to do pink for sun, brown for shade. We kind of know what these areas are doing right now. If you aren't sure where your sun and shade is, maybe go out there, check in the middle of the day. You could easily use the compass we have to give you a better idea of where the building casts a shadow. So we know, and we're just going to loosely circle these areas. Just below our greenhouse here, we've got a lot of shade. So we've got shade here. We've got a lot of shade over here by our oak tree. And we'll just kind of loosely fill those in. So those are going to be our shade areas. Just we want to be careful about planting in those areas. This is going to help us determine what plants we choose. And then the rest of this, so we've definitely got a planting area here. And then we've got a whole big field here. We'll call this the sun area. And so that's just really quick and simple for our space. You know, it kind of looks like a little Mickey Mouse when you look back at it. But it just lets me know what I have to work with. So if I really want a shade garden, I know I need to put it back in these areas. If I want a sun garden, I'm going to stay in the pink. So this is just kind of a quick thing. We're going to move on to another one. Just to show you how nice and quick, I'll just put shade. Sun, so I know forever. And I'm just going to move on this piece of paper since it's a big piece of paper. Okay, so the next drawing we'll just make a shot at is movement, something that I really like diagramming. So movement, where we're going to walk, where the walkways are. I do have a couple of gates on here. So right here by this finger, there's a gate. There's a doorway here, and over here it's kind of hard to read, but there's some sliding doors back here that go into our greenhouse. So we know these are places people are going to move. I'm going to go ahead and draw that with my Sharpie. So apologize, this is a little bit rolled, and then we kind of have some movement here. Here, I'll go ahead and say this is not a doorway that we want to move through because there's a private residence. So I'm just going to put X's. We could move here, but really our entry and exit ways are going to be in these locations. So this is where we're going to move in and out. Let me go ahead and grab our nice orchid pink. Again, the colors don't matter. We're just trying to get some contrast. So if we have areas here, there's a boardwalk here. We know that we could easily have flow between here. So this would be an area that we could have pathways. We could probably have a pathway across the boardwalk. So that would be a good way to go in and out of the boardwalk. And we could even maybe walk this way. So we're just drawing ideas of where we could have people move, maybe where we put our pathways. It's a good idea to build our beds on areas other than where we want to move. You know, we could move this way too. Just so you can get an idea of your space, where people are going to be going. And once we're all done, we can even layer these drawings and get an idea of what all this looks like together. So just a simple thing. Obviously, we can change the movement, but just trying to get an idea. Again, just get basics to help our design out. We're going to kind of just rotate this, get a little more room, reusing this piece of paper. Let's try another one. So, viewpoints. That's a really good one. So, what do we look at when we see our garden? What do we see out of our house? Sometimes you might want to look at windows on your house. So, views. We'll just write this here so we know what we're talking about. So, views. There's definitely some views from here. So, I'm just going to use my Sharpie and kind of look at where we could view. So there's a house up here. There's windows. We could see from there. Out of this greenhouse, just like where we're walking, that's another place where you're likely to stand and see through our space. So there's a viewpoint. And then this boardwalk. You know, this boardwalk is raised a little bit, about a foot off the ground. Maybe you want to stand in the middle and you want to look out on this space, or you want to look out towards the road, which it's great we marked that road. Maybe that is a view that we want to block. You know, maybe we don't want to see or hear the cars coming down that road. And this is just a simple idea so we can kind of get an idea where we're looking. We probably want to put garden beds or specimens. So let me add a little color to this. So yeah, you could easily have a view here, here. Maybe we'll use a different color for this other one. Again, loose and fast is great, just to kind of, so we're not spending too much time really making this look perfect. So yeah, we get an idea of where we're going to look in here. You know, I don't know how much detail you can see from the camera, but basically it looks like, we'll just kind of use our Sharpie for areas. It looks like, just based on where we're looking, this would be a great area for a bed. Maybe right here, below the boardwalk would be nice. And then this area on the other side of the boardwalk. So these circles are kind of starting to help us know what we want to look at in our garden, maybe where we want to put our spaces. So again, viewpoints. I really think this road is going to be a big part of the future plans. So, you know, you can see things from the road. You can see the road from our garden. That's something we definitely want to consider in the future.
Ben, I've got an aerial shot of the space I just want to throw up here on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what the actual view of the garden space
and here,
looks
I'll move this out of the way. And that's actually the exact same orientation we have here. So you can kind of see up here up here in this space, that what he's got in the corner, that's just an aerial view. I think you got that from a drone shot.
Yep.
You can get some low quality images from like Google Maps. You can go, if you live in Davidson County, you could just type in Davidson County property maps, and you could type in your address, and you can get a accurate drawing of your map. Probably could have printed that out today, but it's very similar to the drone shot. It's basically going to be a very accurate property map of what we're looking at. Some of those even have satellite images on them. So any way that you can get a view of your space, go for it. Maybe in a later time we'll talk about elevation or standing pictures and drawing off of that. But this is something a lot of people really understand.
Christine says Metro was kind enough to provide the original development sewer plan for my neighborhood. So, and there's also the call before you dig line 811.
Yeah, definitely something. And, you know, I'm not going to draw the power lines here, but, you know, I didn't think about mentioning overhead power lines is something you might talk about. Shoot, let's do that right now. But yeah, so knowing, and that might be a diagram in itself, is knowing where the sewer is, where the water's going to drain, is really important. I'll go ahead and tell you, this garden right now kind of has water slowing down through it, so it really doesn't have a river, a ditch, or a drainage problem right now. But for utility, so where's our power lines? I'll just go ahead and tell you that our power line right now is right here, up by the road. There's also a power line going back here. And then we also have possibly a power outlet here. So say if you're going to do entertaining out in your landscape, or if you want to put lights in your landscape, that's a good thing to know about. Maybe we'll use shocking yellow for those electrical. And again, any drains, you know, if you have French drains in your landscape, that's good to know. That's a good way to get water out. Drainage ditches, underground pipes. I know in my backyard, I have a sewer line running right through my backyard, so I can't plant anything above that. So that really helps dictate what I'm going to put in my landscape and where I'm going to put it. You know, if you come in and talk to us at Bates, we're going to kind of ask all these questions, like what do you have? What do we need to worry about? What do we need to avoid? So yeah, utilities, you know, if Metro can give you some of these documents, that's great. You know, if you're I mean, really anyone has access to these documents publicly. If you go to the Nashville Metro mapping system, you can look up utilities and floodplains and stuff like that. It's really handy. Let me see. I'll just try to do maybe a few more just little diagrams so we get an idea of where we are. So we did viewpoints, we did movement, we did sun and shade. We can do, let me think of something else we could do right now. Maybe like planting areas. So kind of what we'd like to do with these spaces. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of circle some of these areas. In fact, the viewpoint one that we did earlier might be a good one to kind of tell us where our garden beds might be. So let's see, if we have this kind of area over here, and we've got some plants, that could be a bed area. This could easily be a bed area back here in the shade. Bed area here. And then there's a whole field over here, maybe up here by the road. So I'm just kind of getting some ideas maybe where we'd like to put some beds based on our movement, based on the other drawings. Let's see. So up here would be a great spot for screens. I know that, maybe bigger trees. This is up on a hill. So this is something where we really have a lot of room, a lot of sun. And I'm just going to use dark green for a screen. So we've done some talks on screening plants. So these are going to be large trees, maybe to block the view. Things that stand on their own need to be spaced out. That'd be great for this area. Let's see, you got some nice chrome orange. This area right here, this is also a big area in a field, but we've talked about this might be a great place to put our water troughs that we would love to put raised beds in. I think this would be an ideal location for that. We've got a lot of open area where we can spread them out, do movement. So we'll just mark that. And then I'm going to use our nice orchid pink to kind of label our shade beds. So, this area is pretty shady. This area up against the building is shady because of our other diagram. We know where that is. So that'd be a nice area to put some shade plants. And then we kind of have a third little area right below the boardwalk here. And we don't need to commit to anything right now. We're just kind of getting an idea. Maybe that's something else. So, just looking at these areas, we'll label them. So screen, maybe this could be our, what we call our learning garden or raised beds. I apologize. My left hand will probably get in the front a little bit. I'll try to get it out of the way. This area is pretty sunny, so, maybe flowers would be nice here below the deck. And up here, I'll go ahead and tell you we already have some service berry, which is an edible. So maybe shade edibles, which there's not a ton of, so that'll limit it. Or, maybe natives, since the service berry is a native. So it might be nice to go with that theme in that bed. And then over here would be shade. This is pretty deep shade. I know there's already bulbs in here, which is something we didn't mark. And, be a little careful this time of year. If you have bulbs in the ground underneath the surface, you may want to wait for a few months to see what you have. So yeah, here we're kind of getting a little more specific with our beds. I'm going to show you some examples in magazines from a second that you can kind of get some inspiration as far as really planning what plants are going to be where. But yeah, just figure out your areas, what you want to do with them. Trying to think, if you want a sitting area versus walking area, maybe label out those areas. A lot of people like to make what we call rooms in their landscape. Maybe mark those rooms out. We'll do one more on that. So yeah, rooms. Some people like to make outdoor rooms. These spaces are pretty square, so we could easily make a room here. There's kind of a room right in this space, and I'm just going to use the square so we know that we're making kind of a contained space. And there's even space for rooms over here. If we want to walk through here, we might make rooms. A lot of times to make a room in a landscape, we're going to plant around them. So I'm just going to outline these with some green. You know, maybe that's plant material, maybe that's boxwood, maybe it's laurel, maybe it's something bigger like a holly or an arborvitae. So yeah, maybe this is an idea of our spaces. If we want to make them rooms, we'll start, you know, putting plants perhaps in this area to block it off, perhaps in this area to kind of create these spaces. Okay, I know that's a lot to kind of take in, a little bit of abstract, so a lot of times just diagramming is not enough for us to know where we want to go. Yeah, we know what the space looks like, what kind of stuff is going to grow there, but we really want something more specific. So it's really nice to have some other sources out there. So magazines are a good option. I've got a couple books up here we'll look at. Magazines like Southern Living, I know there's like Southern Garden magazines, are going to have a lot of these kind of plans or garden arrangement plans, which tell you where they would emphasize putting perennials and larger trees. And a lot of times, if you're lucky, they'll actually have a picture of that landscape with it. So it's like we can see the article in the magazine and the picture of what it looks like, and then the actual plan for where they're going to put those plants. Just use it for inspiration. You know, if you like something in that landscape, use it and transfer it over to your design. I've got a really old edible landscaping book here. You know, it's plants really tend to stay hardy in the area they started with, so old books are fine. And let me see if I can find a picture here for y'all. Yeah, so here's a good one. So this is mostly edible gardening, but you know, they have a nice artistic rendering of what this space is going to look like. And then we kind of have this, it looks like color by number, but this is a great way to kind of learn what you like, how you can layer plants. This even has some backdrop plants. A lot of times we'll call this like a program or a schedule for the planting. You know, some people try to keep this really close to their heart and they don't like to let these plans go, but there's tons of sources for these. Like I said, a lot of times garden magazines are a great way, especially if it's regional. You know, if it's a Southeast garden magazine, definitely get it. But yeah, this is mostly perennials. There's some edibles all mixed in, and it's nice to know where to space those. This is going to be great and invaluable. You know, if you see one of these you like, bring it into us, and we can kind of try to emulate that style or find a plant that's similar to that. Let me see if there's some more in here. You know, here's more of a traditional landscape bed. Again, you're going to get a better idea of color when you can get some of these. And then there's this nice where it shows the plants, numbers them. Unfortunately, this is all common names, but if you can get species and all that, then that's a great resource. You know, the best thing within the past 20 years has been the online presence of landscape design, our distributors. You can find a lot of these online nowadays if you just, you know, Google a landscape plan or a landscape schedule. You can find these pretty easily. I think there's probably a few more in here. And actually here, I'll go ahead and show y'all. Here's some other examples of just diagrams for spaces. Let's see if I can hold that up a little bit. But yeah, just loose, simple. We're just basically making bubbles, areas, circles, squares for spaces that we really want to see. It doesn't need to be really accurate. We're just getting an idea of where we want our plants. And here I've got more of like a textbook, and we'll probably refer to this a little more in another talk. But this is just a landscape graphics book. Now, they do have some examples. I'll show y'all some. You know, here's a concept plan, kind of what we talked about earlier. This is going to have a lot of those plans combined together. Like I said, you know, draw your buildings, your sidewalks in dark, and then you can kind of just doodle, like this is where I'd like a pathway, or, you know, this is where I would like a public area. Maybe here I want something private or storage. So whatever you can do to get what you're thinking about on paper to help you work through it. Again, if you get stuck, please feel free, bring it to us. You know, bring us magazine clippings, bring us doodles. You know, if you're good friends with your neighbor and you like their landscape, go take some pictures of what they have, and we can try to decide what they have and where we can put that in your landscape. Just really simple, get an idea. You know, that way we can get specific plant varieties later down the line. Likely there's many options for you in your space. So once we get a little more specific, you know, we can work that out later. But yeah, just wanted to give y'all a simple, I'm sure there's probably some questions. Again, we're going to do a more specific drawing one down the line where we'll get a little more detailed on this. And this is a project we'd like to have ongoing. So, you know, whatever we can do with this, anything else y'all want to touch on, we'll kind of use this example and we can draw off it. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I have today. I know we kind of just touched on it. Now there's a lot we can go into. But yeah, just get what you have out of your, like I said, the kitchen junk drawer, some pieces of paper, and just get that idea down there. And it's something we can work off of.
Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about measuring, like before heading to the drawing table, what you want to look out for, stuff like that?
Yeah, measuring, you know, you can use a ruler to measure your spaces. You know, we used basically a long tape measure, like a landscape tape measure. You could even use your feet. You know, you can pace it off if that's close enough for you. I will tell you that most people's step is about 3 feet on average. So with this one, each of these little squares on our graph paper is 3 foot. We could easily have measured this by paces. The best thing you can do, let me get a blank piece of paper here. The best thing you can do when you're going to measure your garden is go off 1 point. So if our greenhouse is up here, we know that this is a really defined corner. So this corner is really never going to move on us. It's a good hard structure with a beam. We know we can measure off of that corner, so that's really nice. So, you know, we can measure this way, we can measure that way, and we know it's straight. So basically, if we want to know, say for instance, where the sidewalk is, or the boardwalk, it's a wooden boardwalk, you know, we're basically just going to go from that corner that we're measuring from. Like I said, you could easily pace it. You know, if this is 10 paces, that's 30 feet. You could take a tape measure. We didn't touch on, there are like walking tape measures that you can use to measure a space. Those are great if you have one of those. But just make sure you're measuring off of something that doesn't change. So a building corner, maybe a sidewalk, something defined. But yeah, so like for these boxwood, whenever we wanted to figure out where these boxwood are right here, these large boxwood, what I did was I measured down here and then measured straight out and tried to be as close as I could, but this kind of helped me determine exactly where these boxwood were in that space. Again, there's more corners over here I could measure off of just to get the plant. And then when you're measuring the plants, let's try to get the center of the plant. That's really going to make it consistent. So like this dense U's a little bigger over here. It's a really large plant. It's kind of got an undefined shape. But if I make sure to measure from that center point there, I know that it's going to be consistent, and I know that I can be pretty accurate. So yeah, when you're measuring your space, again, just walk or measure with a tape off of that one same corner so that all your measurements are accurate enough. And then just make sure to go to the center of your plants when you measure. That's about the best thing you can do.
I bet tying up strings to stakes would be a good way to get an idea of the space that you're developing as well.
Yeah, and we can probably show you all that down the road at some point. But yeah, you can use twine. They make marking twine. Yellow or orange, that's really going to help you see what you're marking. But yeah, if you were to put a stake in here and then a stake in over here with these boxwood, you could run a string between those two, and that's going to be a straight line. It'll help you stay accurate. If you really want to get detailed in your garden, you can use that twine or marking twine to mark out all your pathways or your beds, and get a bunch of stakes, and that's a great way to visually see it. Some folks have trouble really visualizing stuff from this view, so a lot of times we just need to get out in the garden, mark it out, so we can really get an idea of what we're looking at. Because don't feel like you're alone because you can't understand a garden from this perspective. It's something that takes a little time, but it's definitely the way that a lot of landscapes end up getting drawn out. So it's nice to just get an idea of what we're looking at, but definitely nothing beats getting out in the landscape and marking it visibly. Spray paint, if you don't worry about what you're spraying or there's no plants, use a spray can, and that'll help mark out what you're looking at.
Yeah, there's spray chalk available too.
Spray chalk
that can wash out.
Yep, and then if it rains, it's gone. Yeah.
I'm going to mention too, just for some stuff in my backyard, I took a photo with my iPad, from the digital route. Took a photo, imported it into like one of the drawing applications they have, and whether or not you actually have a pencil or a stylus, not really a matter if you want to scratch on top of that photo, but it's really great to mark up and circle to get the perspective right if you're not like so talented with drawing straight lines or whatever. Yeah. Christine has a question.
Sure.
I have a 2-year-old crabapple sapling. I need to move to a permanent location before it starts to bud. I'm struggling committing to a tree location. Are there any considerations I may be missing? I have a hill with a high area near the house and a low area that's pretty rocky.
Yeah, crabapple is a nice versatile tree. So we can get me some scratch paper here I can draw on. What you might consider is canopy, which we didn't really talk about, but that's something you might want to look at. So crabapple, just how big is that thing going to get? Typically 10 feet across is about as big as they'll go. So, if we go across this, it's going to be 10 feet. That's something to consider with the crabapple. So where you're going to put it, don't put it any closer than 6 feet from a sidewalk or from a building. Hills are something to consider, but more so your rocky soil. So the rocky soil is really just going to make it difficult to dig. Can you dig? That might be an even better thing to ask when you're moving it. Maybe before you decide to move that crabapple, maybe start digging where you want to put it. Sometimes until you get a shovel in the ground, we just don't know what we're going to find. So, depending on how big your crabapple is, you're going to need to dig, a good couple feet away from where it initially was in the ground. Probably, 3 feet across hole is a good minimum for transplanting. You're going to need to be able to dig a hole that big where it's going to go. But other than that, crabapple's pretty resilient. Sunshade. So crabapple's pretty tolerant, but it prefers sun. So just, make sure it's a sunny spot without a ton of shade. But other than that, there's not too much to worry about with the crabapple. They do produce fruit that birds can get a hold of, so maybe you don't want that near a sidewalk, near where you park. So those are some considerations. But generally, the size of the plant is going to be big for those shade trees. Crabapple we usually categorize as a small shade tree, so 10 to 15 feet is pretty common. Really versatile, few restrictions. With your hill, just make sure you plant it straight on that hill. But other than that, just look at the size of the tree, how big it's going to be, and use that to determine where you're going to put it.
All right. Thank you from Christine. It looks like we don't have any other questions. I'll go ahead and allow for another minute for questions to file in. You got anything else you'd like to add, Ben?
Well, this is kind of fun and different. And I know, not everyone wants to get this deep. This is kind of what I went to school for, so it's kind of fun to get to play around with this. I think it can be really enjoyable just to kind of sit down and spitball ideas about your space, no matter how you do it. So, my big suggestion is just have fun. And the more you play around with it and think about it, the more happy you're going to be with that space. If you're like me, and in fact, I didn't talk about this, was stages. The way I do my yard is each year I'll kind of expand a bed into a space I like or grow it. You might do a diagram of stages. Where do I want to start? Where's important to me? Maybe it's budget, maybe it's time, but what stages can I do this landscape in? Usually people are going to start with the big plants, the foundation plants we recently had a talk about. Just think about the future and planning, and make it fun.
A question just came in. How do you design for seasonal interest?
Yeah, seasonal interest, the kind of edible landscaping book, anything that's with perennials. Let's see, I lost that one. Seasonal interest. A lot of these pictures with colors are a great one. It's going to be about plant selection at that point. And I usually recommend mixing evergreens with non-evergreens and flowering plants all in one, so diversity can be really important for that seasonal interest. But if you look at a picture like this, they have kind of these plants in fall color over here, probably a red maple or something like that in the background, and then they're going to have flowers in the foreground. Now, some of these pictures, they kind of combine all the seasons, but they usually take a picture from a certain season so you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. But yeah, for diversity, I really recommend mixing different types of plants. So perennials are great for lots of constant color and flowers. Your deciduous shade trees are going to be great for fall color. And then, shrubbery in between, so whether it's a holly that gives you a nice green base, or maybe it's some sort of plant like a burning bush that turns bright red in the fall. So, mixing different types of plant together is kind of how I approach that. Let's see if I can find another one of these. Again, with these kind of bed plantings. Let's see, there's one for pots.
Bloom timing comes up into my mind as well when things are all in the bloom or they bloom succession.
Right. And that's that is definitely a more advanced way to think of gardens. I've done a lot more experience with like large plantings, trees, shrubs, stuff like that. But like this one where you've got kind of the edibles, flowers, this is a great example for how you can plant those. Because a lot of times in these plans, they're going to emphasize seasonal color and change of color, especially in these massings. So this is a great idea for doing that, especially perennial beds. You're going to be able to play around with bloom season. For instance, Lenten rose right now is blooming. My Lenten rose is one of the only things blooming in my shade garden. Those really aren't going to be blooming here in 4 or 5 months, but I do have some other plants in that bed. Most of our plants bloom spring through summer, but just adding some of those foliage plants or annuals or winter blooming plants into that mix is going to kind of give you that seasonal change. So yeah, just mix up your types of plant for sure.
Okay, Paula chimed in here. What is the best way to prep a grassy area for a new garden?
Yeah, I get this a lot. A lot of people are going for their new veggie gardens right now. To go from grass to a garden bed is probably going to be a several-year process. The first thing I would do is kill the grass, kill the weeds, which typically means a chemical weed control. You could try covering it with plastic, frying the weeds, but in my experience, if you're going from lawn to garden bed, you do need to have a period there where you're spraying typically a Roundup or a glyphosate product before we're doing any planting, just to eradicate all those grasses. You know, if you have perennial grass, it's going to continue to come back year after year if we don't kill it. You know, spring, summertime's a great time to do that. You're just going to have to get ahead of your planting by a few weeks to a month to allow that weed control to do its job, kill the plants before you start doing anything else. After that, it could be as simple as you bringing in topsoil and then putting the plants in the ground and mulching. If it's a veggie garden, you're probably going to end up tilling before you plant. But just get all that grass dead, typically with a chemical. Is the most effective method. And then once all that grass is brown and dead, you know, we're going to start tilling up that bed, start edging that bed to get our shape, and then we can start popping plants in there. I don't think we always need to till the entire bed, and I think this is something that gets overlooked a lot of times. You know, if we're putting trees, shrubs, perennials in the ground, if we can dig big holes for those plants, we shouldn't need to till up all the ground. So, you know, get rid of everything there, maybe mulch the bed so we know our bed, and then just start planting and dig the holes per plant.
Barbara's got a question. How do you plan a transition from existing plantings to something else, i.e. from contractor standards to native landscaping?
Yeah, sure.
Also, keep in mind, Ben, we have a couple questions after that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just, you know, that's a good one, and I didn't talk about existing plants. So yeah, you can see all the circles are existing plants I have, and that's why we marked those out. So, you know, like these serviceberry, maybe I would say keep, since those are native. And then we have these boxwood. You know, say maybe you're tired of these boxwood. They are very big, and overgrown. So maybe we're just gonna knock these out. And so we could just diagram that we're taking these out. And we know this area is prime for replanting. You know, that's why it's real important to mark where and what, if you can figure out what the plants are you have, that way we can make some decisions whether we think this works with our native garden or whether it doesn't. So, you know, if we're looking at boxwood, those aren't strictly native. So maybe we'll do away with those. Maybe they're overgrown. You know, there's some roses down here. Maybe we don't want roses. So, you know, we could plant stuff typically right where those have come out, as long as we can get that entire plant out. So just make sure you label the plants you have where they are. And then if you're going to take them out, just cross them out and look at that space again without that plant, to see how it's going to do. There's some exceptions to not being able to plant. So, you know, if you had a very large tree, you need to consider getting that stump ground out and what that's going to do to the area. Or say if you have a black walnut, common question for us, we're not going to want to plant much under that black walnut, so just know that when you're going to be replacing plants. But otherwise, yeah, just do a diagram or a drawing of what you have, and then just start crossing them out and seeing what the space looks like without those plants that are just undesirable for you. There's a lot of natives out there, but knowing what you're going for is half the battle.
Sue asks, I have a creek that runs through my yard with a gradual sloped hill on the other. Any ideas for what to put on that sloped hill to keep it from sliding into the creek, but also look good, whether it be bushes or flowers?
Yeah. So you'd want to go for fast-growing plants, typically for erosion control. The catch is a lot of those fast-growing plants can kind of get big fast. They don't really work for small spaces. But yeah, for a space like that, just anything that is vigorous root system and water tolerant. So willow is one of the first things that comes to mind. Doesn't need to be a weeping willow. We have dappled willows and bush willows, which have a very naturalized look. Those tend to grow extremely fast. You don't want to put them above, say, a sewer pipe. But in your case, a hill next to a waterway, willow's great for that. You could use more like wetland natives, like Itea. You could use Clethra. Anything that's going to be vigorous in rooting, go for it. Birches, if you want more of a tree, river birches could really establish quickly. Again, anything that's quick to grow, that's what you're going to be looking at. That way you don't get erosion. The alternative is ground covers, but with ground covers you do have to worry about them getting out of control. So like bamboo. Bamboo would probably work and establish that area. Just know some bamboos might become a permanent fixture in that area once they establish. So, anything fast growing, quick rooting, that's what I would go for.
All right, and finally, Kim asks, is there a plant that is easy maintenance, stays around 3 feet tall, but has blooms spring to fall?
So rose, sometimes people have a opinion one way or the other on roses. There's a lot of roses that will do that. We get miniature roses in now, and they tend to bloom spring through fall. Mine were blooming pretty hard in the fall. We just moved out our encore azaleas from our greenhouse. Encore azaleas are kind of different than most azaleas. They prefer a good sunny location. They will bloom springtime, summertime, and in the fall. And they're evergreen, so they kind of hit a lot of those things for people. So your roses, your encore azaleas. There's some other ones. Spirea is pretty good for most of the spring and summer. Abelia has a pretty long season. And some of these things you might just get with good leaf colors. So with Abelia, you'll get orange, yellow, or variegated leaves, and then you'll get blooms in the summer and fall, so you'll get kind of a double duty plant. So yeah, anything like that. Like I said, definitely the encore azaleas are something to look at. There's a lot of small varieties, and not much blooms about as long as that does. So yeah, and there's typically newer varieties, they breed to bloom more. That tends to be the trend. So in here at Bates, we like to carry a lot of these newer varieties, which will give you that extended season. So yeah, consider some of those.
All right. It looks like your feed is frozen somehow, but that's okay because we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. But we want to thank everybody. Yeah, that's the other camera. That seems to be working, but your other one is literally frozen. It looks like you're making a good point, though. But thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Oh, Christine's got one more question. Sorry. How do we pick up larger quantities of soil and compost we offer? Like not the bags, but massive quantities. And Nora's kind of chiming in. We have delivery.
Yeah, we have delivery. If you have a pickup truck, even if it has a short bed on it, or you can find someone who has a short bed. I know some people have even rented a pickup truck just for the day. Whatever you can bring in that we can get a scoop of soil into, we'd be happy to do that in bulk. So our scoop buckets are about 4 or 5 feet wide. So as long as we can get that into your vehicle, we'd love to. Some people have even, brought in plastic buckets so that it can make it easier for them to get it off. So yeah, bulk, we definitely deliver. If you're getting a lot, that's very convenient. Pickup trucks, trailers, whatever you can bring in that we can get it into.
Rent a U-Haul or one of those Home Depot flatbeds.
Yep.
Those work too.
Absolutely. Maybe bring a tarp if you're getting a lot. I know there can be some regulation on having soil fly down the road. So, bring a tarp and we'll load it.
Yep. I believe our newest dump truck for Earth Mix can deliver about 6 full scoops of garden currently. I think some of our lighter materials like mushroom compost might go up to 8 scoops. But so, if you're looking to get a big amount for a lot of raised beds, that would be the way to go. And the delivery fee is based on zip code. So, it's a flat fee. Just pay that one amount and you get as much as we can fit in there.
Yep. And he can put it right where you want it. And if you have a spot where he can dump it and put a tarp out, that's sometimes a lot easier than wheelbarrowing from your car. So, yeah, absolutely. That's a great option. I'll probably be doing that here this weekend.
Yeah, we're ramping up here real quick. Okay. Well, I think that's everything.
All right. That sounds good. See y'all next week.